Welcome to the dark beyond. Prepare to be captivated by stories that will send chills down your spine and keep you on the edge of your seat. So buckle up and prepare to delve into the abyss. Today, we're diving deep into the perplexing case of Brianna Williams, a young mother from Jacksonville, Florida, whose world crumbled when her 5-year-old daughter, Taylor Williams, vanished without a trace.
Jacksonville 911, what's the location of your emergency?
At 7 a.m. on November 6th, Brianna Williams tells police her 5-year-old daughter is gone.
What's going on?
I do not know where my daughter is.
Williams calmly answers questions at first.
Where was she last seen?
She was here with me.
Then she begins to cry for several minutes.
As fast as it can.
What began as a missing child case quickly spiraled into a twisted tale of lies, deceit, and unimaginable tragedy. This is the chilling case of Brianna Williams. Brianna Williams, a young woman in her early 20s, seemed to be navigating the challenges of single motherhood. Originally from Alabama, she had relocated to Jacksonville, Florida, seeking a fresh start with her daughter, Taylor. Brianna enlisted in the Navy, hoping to build a stable future for herself and her daughter.
Neighbors and acquaintances would later recall instances of Brianna appearing overwhelmed and struggling to cope with the demands of parenting. Taylor, a bright and bubbly child, was often seen playing alone outside their apartment complex, her infectious laughter echoing through the courtyard.
As time went on, cracks began to appear in Brianna's carefully constructed facade.
Her behavior became increasingly erratic, and she withdrew from social circles, isolating herself and Taylor from those who might have offered support. Taylor's once vibrant spirit seemed to dim, and she appeared withdrawn and subdued. Neighbors noticed bruises on the young girl, raising alarm bells about potential abuse. Brianna's once active social media presence dwindled, and her posts became less frequent and more cryptic.
November 6th, 2019 began like any other autumn morning in Jacksonville. But for Brianna Williams, this day would mark the beginning of a nightmare from which she could never awaken.
That morning, Brianna called 911 to report Taylor missing from their apartment. She claimed to have last seen her daughter sleeping peacefully in her bed the night before, only to discover her gone the next morning.
Panic and desperation laced her voice as she pleaded for help in finding her little girl.
Issue Charlie 116, 1012, 1020 is going to be 661 Ivy, 661 Ivy. Hey, all right, man. All right. Hey, tell what's happening.
I woke up this morning and started getting away from me.
Cancel that.
She wasn't in her room.
Okay. Have you had any problems with anybody?
The community rallied around Brianna, organizing search parties and blanketing the city with missing person posters. Law enforcement descended upon Brianna's apartment, meticulously combing for clues. However, as they delved deeper into the investigation and Brianna's account of events, inconsistencies began to emerge, casting a shadow of suspicion over the distraught mother. As investigators meticulously pieced together the events leading up to Taylor's disappearance, Brianna's story began to crumble under scrutiny.
Surveillance footage from the apartment complex contradicted Brianna's claims of not leaving the residence during the crucial hours when Taylor vanished. The footage showed Brianna carrying a large, heavy bag out of her apartment and loading it into her car late at night, several hours after she claimed to have last seen Taylor.
When confronted with this evidence, Brianna's story shifted and evolved. each new version contradicting the last. Her erratic behavior and shifting alibis raised red flags, suggesting that she was hiding something sinister. The investigation took a grim turn when investigators discovered traces of blood in the trunk of Brianna's car. Forensic testing revealed the blood belonged to Taylor, confirming their worst fears. Taylor had not simply wandered off. She had been the victim of foul play.
Faced with irrefutable evidence, Brianna continued to maintain her innocence, clinging to her ever-changing story.
As pressure mounted, Brianna finally cracked. She confessed to accidentally killing Taylor, claiming that the young girl had fallen and hit her head. Investigators refused to accept Brianna's version of events, suspecting that she was downplaying her involvement in Taylor's death.
Rose's remains were found in a shallow grave in Alabama just a few days after her mother, Brianna Williams, reported her missing from Jacksonville.
After days of relentless searching, a heartbreaking discovery was made. Taylor's remains were found hundreds of miles away from her home in a wooded area near Brianna's former residence in Alabama.
The discovery sent shockwaves through the community and beyond, shattering any remaining hope that Taylor might be found alive.
Forensic experts determined that Taylor had been dead for several days before her body was discovered. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with abuse and neglect. Brianna Williams was arrested and charged with aggravated child abuse, child neglect, and giving false information to law enforcement. She pleaded guilty to aggravated manslaughter in connection with Taylor's death.
During her sentencing hearing, prosecutors argued that Brianna had shown a callous disregard for her daughter's life and had gone to great lengths to cover up her crimes.
Brianna's defense team argued for leniency, claiming that she was a struggling single mother who had made a terrible mistake. In the end, the judge sentenced Brianna Williams to 20 years in prison. The disappearance of Taylor Williams sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community of Jacksonville, Florida.
As news of the investigation spread and the horrifying details of Taylor's death came to light, the community struggled to come to terms with the fact that someone they knew, someone who had portrayed herself as a loving mother, could be capable of such a heinous act.
Vigils were held, and memorials were created in Taylor's honor, as the community sought solace and a sense of closure. The outpouring of grief and support for Taylor's extended family was a testament to the deep impact the young girl had made on those around her.
From the outset, investigators faced a tangled web of lies and inconsistencies in Brianna's account of Taylor's disappearance.
Surveillance footage from the apartment complex showed Brianna carrying a large, heavy bag out of her apartment and loading it into her car the night Taylor disappeared.
When confronted with this discrepancy, Brianna changed her story, claiming that she had taken Taylor out for ice cream.
As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a pattern of deceit and manipulation in Brianna's life. It became clear that Brianna was skilled at crafting a facade of normalcy while concealing a darker reality. Beyond Brianna's inconsistent statements, a trail of physical evidence pointed to her involvement in Taylor's disappearance and death. Forensic investigators discovered traces of blood in the trunk of Brianna's car, which DNA testing later confirmed belonged to Taylor.
Inside Brianna's apartment, investigators found cleaning supplies and evidence that someone had attempted to clean up bloodstains.
The discovery of Taylor's remains hundreds of miles away in a wooded area near Brianna's former residence in Alabama, further solidified the case against her. Faced with mounting evidence, Brianna's carefully constructed facade crumbled.
The inconsistencies in her stories, the physical evidence linking her to the crime scene, and the remote location where Taylor's remains were found all pointed to a calculated and callous act.
While Brianna eventually confessed to killing Taylor, her confession was shrouded in claims of accidental death and attempts to minimize her role in the tragedy. However, the evidence contradicted her claims, revealing a deliberate act of violence against a defenseless child. The investigation, though emotionally grueling, ultimately brought a sense of justice for Taylor. As the investigation into Taylor's disappearance intensified, Brianna Williams found herself increasingly isolated, her web of lies collapsing around her.
Though she attempted to maintain her innocence, cracks began to appear in her carefully constructed facade.
The turning point came when investigators confronted Brianna with the overwhelming evidence against her. The blood found in her car, the inconsistencies in her stories, the attempts to conceal her actions, all pointed towards her guilt. Faced with the undeniable truth, Brianna's resolve crumbled. In a desperate attempt to salvage what remained of her life, Brianna Williams entered a guilty plea to aggravated manslaughter in connection with Taylor's death.
During her sentencing hearing, Brianna addressed the court, her words a mix of remorse and self-pity.
The brutality of Taylor's injuries, the calculated attempts to conceal her death, painted a picture of a cold and callous act, far from the accidental tragedy Brianna sought to portray. The prosecution, armed with the weight of evidence and driven by a desire for justice for Taylor, argued for a harsh sentence. In March 2022, the courtroom fell silent as the judge delivered Brianna Williams' sentence. She was given the maximum sentence of 20 years in prison for aggravated manslaughter, a sentence met with mixed reactions from the community. For some, the sentence provided a small measure of solace, a confirmation that Taylor's life mattered and that her killer would be held accountable. However, for others, the sentence felt inadequate, a hollow victory in the face of the irreplaceable loss of a young life. Taylor's case, a stark reminder of the vulnerability of children and the devastating consequences of domestic violence, sparked outrage and calls for reform within the child welfare system. Though Brianna Williams' conviction provided closure, it did little to answer the lingering questions haunting Taylor's family and the community.
The full extent of Brianna's actions remained shrouded in mystery.
What drove her to commit such a horrific act against her own flesh and blood?
These questions continued to torment those seeking a deeper understanding of the tragedy.
Though Taylor's story ended in tragedy, her memory lived on, shining a spotlight on child abuse and the need for prevention. The Brianna Williams case concluded with a conviction, but left many unanswered questions. Dr. Sarah Adler, a forensic psychologist, helps us understand the psychological complexities.
Cases like Brianna's are rare but deeply unsettling. A parent taking a child's life defies our understanding of familial bonds. Financial stress and social isolation can create a pressure cooker environment. These pressures can lead to a tragic inability to cope. Understanding the why does not equate to condoning. Brianna's choices resulted in the tragic loss of a young life. It's a reminder of the importance of early intervention and support systems.
In the aftermath of the trial, Jacksonville grappled with the emotional weight of the Brianna Williams case. Town hall meetings and online discussions became platforms for expressing grief and searching for healing.
We need to be more vigilant. We need to pay attention to the signs and create a supportive environment.
Many residents expressed frustration and anger, questioning how such a crime could occur undetected. Others felt profound sadness and empathy for Taylor. A young life tragically cut short. Memorials grew, adorned with flowers, stuffed animals, and messages of love. Taylor's story became a catalyst for conversations about child welfare and the responsibility to protect the vulnerable. Through these discussions, Jacksonville began the process of healing. The chilling case of Brianna Williams stands as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of children and the devastating consequences of domestic violence. Taylor Williams, a bright and innocent 5-year-old, was robbed of her future by the very person entrusted with her care, her mother. Though justice was served through the legal system, the true cost of this tragedy can never be fully measured. A community was left grappling with grief, anger, and a profound sense of loss. Taylor's absence continues to be felt, a void that can never be filled. Yet, amidst the sorrow, Taylor's story ignited a spark of determination. A community, once shaken to its core, resolved to honor her memory by becoming more vigilant, more aware, and more committed to protecting the most vulnerable among them. Taylor's legacy extends beyond the courtroom walls. Her story is a call to action. Recognize the signs of child abuse and neglect. If you are concerned, reach out to Child Protective Services or law enforcement. Your actions could be the lifeline a child needs. Honor Taylor's memory by ensuring every child is safe and loved.